Here's a story that has been sitting in the back of my mind for a long time. It begins not in Acadia or Nova Scotia, but in the household of a queen. Somewhere in the court of Queen Henrietta Maria of England served a lady in waiting, a woman whose name has been lost to history. We don't know what she looked like. We don't know her age. We don't know whether she was English, French, or Scottish, although some historians have suggested that she may have been related to Sir William Alexander, the man whose dream gave Nova Scotia its name. But even that is uncertain. What we do know is that she was there, living in her royal circle, and somehow her path crossed that of a man named Claude de la Tour. How a French colonial adventurer and trader ended up meeting a lady from the Queen's household is one of the first mysteries of this story. By the late 1620s, Claude Latour had spent decades involved in the affairs of Acadia, a colony claimed by competing powers and shaped by shifting alliances. Then, in 1629, everything changed. English forces captured Acadia, and Claude found himself a prisoner in English hands. Rather than resisting his captors, Claude switched his alliance to the English crown. He was taken to England. Claude somehow managed not only to survive his change in fortunes, but to prosper. He gained favor at court, received lands and honors, and moved in circles far removed from the wilderness of Acadia. Yet somehow his path crossed with a lady-in-waiting to Queen Henrietta Maria of England. We don't know where they met. We don't know who introduced them. We don't know what she saw in him. Yet somehow these two people from vastly different worlds found themselves standing on the same path. And they married. And then she made a choice that astounds me. She boarded a ship bound for the wilderness and the uncertainty of Acadia. She left behind royal households, social niceties, court ceremony, and a world connected to kings and queens. But ahead lay adventure, to be sure. A wooden ship, a dangerous Atlantic crossing, and a frontier settlement at the edge of the known world. Why did she go? Was she in love? Was she adventurous? Had she grown tired of court life? Did Acadia represent freedom, opportunity, or a chance to build something entirely new? History doesn't tell us that. All we know for sure is that she came. And Acadia in the 1630s was no peaceful backwater. The French claimed it, the English claimed it, the Scots claimed it. Governors came and went. Fortunes rose and fell with the arrival of ships, and the future of the colony seemed to change with every tide. And at the center of much of this uncertainty stood Claude de la Tour, a man who seemed remarkably skilled at turning setbacks into opportunities. Yet one of his greatest challenges may have come from within his own family. Claude's decision to support the English placed him at odds with his son Charles, who remained fiercely loyal to France. At a time when control of Acadia was being contested by the French, English, and Scottish interests, Charles had become one of the most important defenders of the French cause. From Fort St. Louis to Cap de Sable in present-day Port Latour, Charles held out against rival claims and fought to maintain a French presence in Acadia. For years, he was one of the last and strongest supporters of French authority in the region. Father and son now found themselves on opposite sides of the struggle. Claude had aligned himself with the English crown. Charles remained loyal to France. Claude tried to convince his son to switch his allegiance to England, offering titles and lands that he had negotiated when he promised to persuade his son to join the English. No matter how much his father offered or how much he threatened, Charles refused. With Claude's failure to turn Charles's allegiance to the English, his fortunes collapsed. Recognizing the uncertainty of his situation, he offered his wife a choice. She could return to England. She refused. Time passed, and Claude was eventually able to reconcile with his son Charles. Charles agreed to allow his father to return to Cap de Sable and French allegiance, but trust, once broken, is not easily restored. So Charles allowed his father and stepmother to live nearby, but not within the walls of the fort itself. And so Claude and his wife lived outside the fort. Imagine her position. A woman from a household of a queen suddenly living in a colony where loyalties shifted, borders moved, and even members of the same family could find themselves on opposing sides. But she made a life here in this wilderness of Port Latour. At least one visitor, Nicola Denny, remembered her as a gracious hostess. It's one of the very few glimpses we have of her as a person. Not a title, not a footnote, but as a real person. Someone with her own strength and her own story to tell. Why did she stay? Did she stay because she loved Claude? Did she stay because Acadia had worked its way into her blood? Did she stay because England no longer had a place for her? We'll never know. We know so little about her. History remembers Claude de la Tour. History remembers governors, kings, forts, and battles. But the lady in waiting to a queen who crossed an ocean and built a life in Acadia has almost disappeared from the record. Her name is gone. Her voice is silent. Yet she was here. She stood on these shores. She made her choices. And that, I think, is reason enough to remember her. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't who she was. Perhaps it's what she found here that made her stay. Until next time, stay curious.